speculation is the heart of it. He knows he's the killer. He did it. He subsequently admitted it to any number of folks, as we all well know. Now, why is it I can't ask him about the fact that he is blaming someone else for the possible perpetration of an offense that he knows himself he committed? Is that not relevant to, quite frankly, his credibility? And is the state allowed only to have his credibility tested as to matters concerning these specific charges and not the murder, especially when the murder is alluded to in the course of the indictment?
All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. For right now, Mr. Clegg, I am going to sustain the objection. It's been noted. I will maybe have to revisit this issue. I will look at any case that you want to cite to me in the interim. This witness will remain under subpoena, but I'm going to sustain the objection. The record's been made.
All right. Let me just bring up another matter while we're at it, Judge.
Oh, sure. I'm here.
I would also like to inquire of Ms. White whether or not Hemi Newman made any sort of statement concerning ever having been visited by a demon or an angel. If the court will recall from the trial of Mr. Newman, there was testimony produced that Mr. Newman indicated to the psychiatrist that he had been visited by a demon, I guess in 1981 or thereabouts, and then again in February of 2010. And then I believe there was additional testimony that shortly after coming back from Longmont, Colorado, while having dinner with his wife, he claimed to have been visited by an angel who told him that Andrea Sneiderman's children were his. This is during the very time frame when he is making these statements to Ms. White, contending that he has some sort of relationship with her. Again, these go directly to the heart of his credibility and believability. They suggest that he is delusional, that he was delusional during the time when he was making these statements to Ms. White, and they would reflect on whether or not anyone should believe a single word he has to say.
Mr. James, record. Response, excuse me?
Your Honor, I agree his mental state would go to his credibility. What I would ask, if counsel is going to ask a question, that he not testify and ask a question. There's a simple way to put the question without him putting facts and evidence, basically citing the psychological report from the last trial. If he wants to ask if Hemi Newman has ever seen a demon or an angel, I invite him to ask this witness. I think it's going to be very, very short. And I would also like for him to narrow it down to a time period as well, from July to November of 2010. But I've got no concerns about that particular question being asked.
So you have no objection to that question as far as the series of questions about, anyway.
I anticipate that a response would be no.
Well, you're not telling me, I don't know what the response is going to be. I'm just limited. I'm just listening to the questions right now.
And I guess what I'm saying is that anything beyond that, perhaps I would have an objection to. If she says no, if she says yes, then obviously, he can explore it, but that's not what I anticipate.
So, if I'm understanding your position, Mr. James, you have no objection to that question?
To that specific question.
All right. Since there's no objection, you can ask it.
Can I ask about whether or not Hemi Newman ever said...
Well, let me ask you, with this posture, counsel, I had no problem taking that brief break, but we've had plenty of time way before this week to do motions, and we've had motions, I've made rulings, but we're not doing any motions within this trial calendar right now.
Yes, sir. I'm just trying to find out what I can ask and what I cannot.
Well, counsel, Mr. Clegg and Mr. James, you've tried a lot of cases. The way it normally works, you ask a question, they either make an objection. If there's no objection, you ask the question. So you can ask whatever you want to ask.
All right, Judge. And I'll ask my questions and see if there's an objection.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Right. Bring them in, please. You may. Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, may I retrieve one of these binders?
Yes, sir. You may retrieve the binder. Yes, sir. Jury's out. Oh, yes. I think it's on the two binders in front of the bench. Yeah. You can have either one. Okay. You can have them. So right now, just bring it back to Kelly. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, make yourself comfortable. You may be seated in any seat. There's technically no assigned seats. You can sit where you want to sit. Come on in, make yourself comfortable. Technically, there's no assigned seats. You can sit anywhere you want to sit. Now, I know we're all creatures of habit. We have a habit of sitting in the same seats. But technically, you can sit wherever you want, as long as everybody has a seat. I always say if you like sitting on this end, come out first. If you like sitting on this end, come out second. But there's technically no assigned seats. You can sit wherever you want to sit, as long as everyone has a seat. Would you invite in Ms. White, please? Come on back up, Ms. White. You're still under oath. Just come on back up. Have a seat. Mr. Clegg, you may continue with those instructions.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. White, did Hemi Newman ever tell you that he had killed Rusty Sneiderman?
No.
How many times would you estimate you spoke with him from the time you found out Rusty Sneiderman was dead on November the 18th until he wound up being arrested?
4 times.
And can you estimate the total period of time that those conversations would have encompassed?
The total minutes?
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here.
Yes.
If you can.
Not long at all, 5-10 minutes.
Okay, all of them, or each individual?
Each of the 3 or 4 contacts.
Okay. Have you had any contact with him since he was arrested back on June the 4th of 2011?
No.
Did Hemi Newman, ever tell you at any point between the time when you first started talking to him in the summer of 2010 in regard to the short sale on his house until December of 2010, whether he had ever been visited by a demon?
No.
Did he ever tell you he had been visited by an angel?
No.
Did he ever tell you that he believed that Andrea Sneiderman's children were his own biological children?
No.
Looking at defense or state's exhibit number 49, could we put that up, please? It's Bates number 006069, please, sir.
Is that the exhibit you want, Ms. Clegg?
It should be page 006069. It sure doesn't look like it, did it?
I can't see the print, so So is that what you want, Ms. Clegg?
Is that page it?
Well,
No.
I'm asking, is that what you
No, it is definitely not it, Your Honor.
Okay.
So
Would you like to have the one displayed that you want?
I would be delighted to have someone else, whoever can display it, I'd be happy to see it.
All right.
You will notice, Your Honor, I'm not attempting to do any of this.
All right. Well, I know you're sounding out commands. I'm assuming you want it to appear.
Well, that's my understanding of technology, Your Honor. I keep talking into my mouth saying computer on,
Okay.
and it doesn't work, so.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, why don't we just, we'll do it the old-fashioned way, Ms. White. How about that?
Okay.
Okay. May I approach her?
Yes, sir. You may approach the witness. Yes, sir.
Let me show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 49. Go to the second page, and is there an email from Mr. Newman to Mrs. Sneiderman saying, okay, whatever you need, and I'm sure we'll get a chance next week to talk about me. In the meantime, find your routine, hopefully not involving the carpool lane. Thanks for being there. By the way, did you see that movie Being There with Peter Sellers? a classic. Did he send her that email?
It appears so, yes.
Okay, and her response was, looking here and then flipping back, not sure I saw that movie, not sure I can watch these types of movies anymore. Was that her response? Take your time.
Correct.
Okay, and he then sent you an email, right?
Correct.
And said, read from the bottom up, what do you think? Was this an example of Hemi Newman asking your input as to what on earth was going on?
Yes.
Okay, so he sends Andrea Sneiderman an email about the movie being there, correct?
Yes.
And she says, never seen the movie, don't know much about it, right?
Correct.
And then he is asking you, tell me, what should I do? What do you think of this?
I don't think it was about the movie.
Okay, well, what was it in regards to?
I think it was,
Those were the emails that preceded it, right?
there were many emails that preceded even that one. I don't think what he was asking me was to interpret her feeling about the movie.
Okay. Well, he was obviously asking you to interpret something for him, right?
Yes.
And this is what day, right?
This is September 28th, 2010.
To your understanding, were they back from London by that time?
Yes.
And to your understanding, based on your testimony here today, the Greenville trip had already taken place, right?
Yes.
So she had given in on Greenville, correct?
Yes.
She had gone and coupled or done whatever with him in London and then finished herself off, correct?
Correct.
And he's still asking your advice as to his relationship with this woman?
Yes.
Did that strike you as unusual?
No.
Okay. Is it because it's Hemi Newman?
It's because after they were together physically and away, they would come back and he would let me know, Hemi would tell me that Andrea was pulling back, would not speak with them, would limit her conversations with them and contact with them, and it was confusing him.
Okay, so the bottom line is, he's telling you this has happened, right? These physical events, we have made love, we have actually engaged in an act of intercourse, we have done other things that happened, right?
Yes.
And he's also telling you, on the flip side, Andrea Sneiderman is saying, I don't want to have anything to do with you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, he then goes on to write a lengthy email to you about India, we left the flight with a kiss, etc., right?
Yes.
And this is the trip, this is after London, right?
Yes.
Okay. And at that time, they are soulmates, right?
Yes.
They are literally completing each other's sentences, right?
Yes.
And with this having gone on, he then writes, I told her we really shouldn't communicate over the next 1 to 2 weeks. She wholeheartedly agreed. That's what he wrote, right?
Yes.
So these two soulmates, who literally can finish one another's sentences, apparently, according to Hemi Newman, having gotten to that point, decide, I don't want to see you for a little while, and the woman goes, boy, do you got that right. Is that what I'm reading there?
I believe there were so many emotions going back between the two of them because they were both married,
Okay.
that was why they felt like they should cease.
Let me ask you this, ma'am.
Your Honor, I'd like for the witness to finish her answer.
All right, I will sustain the objection. Did you finish your answer?
No, sir.
Oh, finish your answer.
I believe it was their emotions that were going back and forth. They were on a yo-yo, both of them, because they were both married with families, doing something that they knew was not a good thing. And I believe that's what he was asking my opinion about. And I believe that's why they wanted to cease communication personally for a couple weeks.
Their emotions, right?
Correct?
You never have spoken to this woman in your entire life, have you?
No, sir.
But you are sitting here on the witness stand speculating not only about Hemi Newman's emotions, about her emotions as well, right?
based on the email.
Based on what Hemi Newman says and what Hemi Newman says alone, correct?
Correct.
You ever been on TV?
Yes.
How many times?
Twice?
How many?
Two or three times?
2 or 3 times. And what shows have you been on there?
Nightline 2020?
Okay, about this case?
No,
Okay, about other cases?
about Hemi Newman's case.
About Hemi Newman's case, fair enough, okay. And did you get paid for doing this?
No.
No? Did you get some free advertising out of it?
Well, sure.
Okay, and in fact, the sequence opens up with you putting balloons in a for sale sign outside of a house, right?
You bet.
Before you're actually interviewed, that's what we see, Melanie White getting ready to sell some real estate, right?
Yes.
Good for you, man. Nothing further.
Thank you.
And the redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Clegg just stated that you based your answer on that it was both of their feelings involved exclusively on what Mr. Newman told you. Did you have an opportunity to review any of the emails that were sent to Mr. Newman from Mrs. Sneiderman?
Yes, a lot of what I said is based on Hemi Newman and what he told me and emails that Andrea had sent Hemi that he forwarded to me.
So you based what you said also on her emails, right?
Correct.
Okay. Pulling back. What do you mean by pulling back when you were saying that earlier in your testimony?
Emotionally,
Yes.
when you want to be with somebody and you're with them, but you know it's wrong, so you emotionally pull back.
Did you talk to him about that?
About Andrea's pulling back, yes.
What did he say when you told him that she was pulling back?
He didn't seem to understand why, because he didn't understand women, and that's why I believe he kept coming to me to get advice.
Did you and Hemi ever have a conversation about Andrea's mother having knowledge of their relationship?
Hemi did mention to me that she had told her mother
About what?
about her having an affair with Hemi.
And how did he say her mother responded?
I don't recall.
You don't know. You'll give me just a second.
You may. Well, actually, ladies and gentlemen, although you had a break earlier, the court's taking a break this time. Where's my deputy? And it will, as soon as he gets in position, it will be, we're going to continue. We're going to take, the court's going to take about a 10-minute, well, we're going to take 8 minutes. We're going to take an 8-minute break. All right, Mr. Deputy, 8 minutes. Yes, sir. All rise. Good afternoon. You may be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for returning in a timely fashion. Mr. James, you may continue if you wish.
When we left off, I believe you indicated that Amy told you that Andrea's mother knew about the relationship.
Yes.
Okay. When you were on cross-examination, counsel asked you specifically about the trip to England, London in particular, and he asked you about the dates and things of that nature. Do you remember the substance of what Hemi told you?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, if I may approach the witness.
You may. Yes, sir.
What page?
Page 10.
1016, thank you, sir.
I want you to start at the bottom of the page with that question. Read the question and then read your response. You can read it out loud.
How was it? Phone? Is that where you're speaking? I'm sorry. How was it?
Right there.
Oh, sorry. Yes, no. He did this after London and after Greenville. I was not aware of any of the Colorado trips. All right, let's start with London. When y'all talked after the London trip, was it face-to-face?
That was a question that was asked, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now go ahead.
My answer was no.
Okay, can you turn the page over? What was the next question?
What did you tell him he should do?
What was your answer?
Go back to his wife and leave Andrea alone to be with her husband and kids. I continually told him that.
What was the next question?
How did he respond?
What was your response?
He never paid attention to what I said. When you say he didn't pay attention to, what do you mean by that? He heard me. You said okay. He heard me, but that's not what he wanted to hear.
Okay, let me stop you. Start right here where it says question.
And what did he tell you? What happened when she came into his room in London? This was a long time ago. I believe that was when he said they laid on the bed and cuddled and did just about everything but have intercourse. Did he use those words, or I said, no, those weren't his words. What words did he use? They kissed and they fondled each other, and then she got up and went into the bathroom. Is that what he said? I said, yes.
Next question.
Did he tell you what she actually did in the bathroom? Yes. He told me that she went into the bathroom to, quote, finish herself off.
Let me stop you there. Now, what you're reading is your testimony from last year,
Yes,
and that's what you told the jury last year, right?
yes,
And that's the same thing that you're telling the jury this year, right?
yes,
Are you sure that's what he told you?
positive.
Thank you.
Mr. Clegg, any recalls?
It is not, however, ma'am, what you told the district attorney's office the year before in 2011. Yes.
I don't recall.
Did you get any text messages forwarded to you by Hemi Newman in the month of December of 2010?
I don't believe so. I don't remember.
You have no recollection of that at all?
No.
Did he forward you any communication between himself and Andrea Sneiderman?
In December,
Yes.
I don't believe so.
Did he ever forward you any communication about a toast or prayer he might have said at a holiday party for GE?
I don't recall.
You have no recollection of that at all?
I don't.
Doesn't ring a bell?
No.
Okay. And let me just ask one other question.
You may. Ask as many as you wish.
And I just need to make sure I understand something correctly. Mr. James just asked you to reread I guess, a portion of your previous testimony where you said, I told him to leave the woman alone. He heard me, but he just didn't do it, right? Or words to that effect.
Yes,
He wouldn't listen to what I have to say, right?
yes,
No question about it. Hemi Newman would not listen to what you had to say.
correct.
He had his mind made up on Andrea Sneiderman, and he was going to do what he had to do, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, sir.
All right. Lawyers, may this witness, Ms. White, be released and excused from her subpoena, or do you want her to remain on the subpoena?
She may be released, Your Honor.
Mr. Clegg?
Your Honor, I have no objection to her being released, but I would ask her to remain under subpoena. It is possible we may need to call her, and I believe she does live here in the Atlanta area, so.
All right, that's fine. What I'm going to do is release you for the day. You're going to still be under subpoena, subject to recall.
Yes?
Let me just ask the lawyers to approach us so I can get a time frame. All right, I'm going to release you, but now, let me, Ms. White, are you going to be, for lack of a better term, in town over the next 2 weeks?
Yes.
You're not leaving town.
Correct. I'm not.
You're released with those conditions.
Thank you.
All right, just be available. All right, Mr. James, call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state at this point would like to publish a portion of a clip. It is clip 3-1.
You may.
Yes, sir.
This is 3-1.
Yes, sir.
Okay, did you discuss your personal life with the defendant?
Yes,
And what are some of the things you may have told him?
everything from hobbies that I had to my children's interests to Rusty's business ventures to previous jobs I had had. Everything you would talk about with someone you're developing a friendship with.
And did you consider him a friend at that time?
Yes,
Okay. During that time, from I guess April to November, did you have the opportunity to observe the defendant?
yes.
How much time would you spend with him on a regular basis or a normal basis?
Initially, we didn't really work in the same buildings, but there were plenty of opportunities and meetings every other day. I saw him in person, if not every day, for meetings. Constant email communications about work and projects. Constant phone calls. Can you repeat the question?
That's fine. Describe the defendant as you knew him. How would you describe him prior to November 18th?
Extremely friendly individual, caring or pretending to be a very caring individual. Seemed to have a very close relationship with all the members of his team. The direct people that reported to him seemed to really truly care about all of them and their families and their home life situations. He was very motivated at work to succeed. He was very thorough in his work. Really willing to take on any obstacle. Willing to, if someone disagreed with him, willing to sort of keep going until he got his way. And that, to be honest, was at the time seemed like a admirable quality for someone in a corporation like GE. It can be tough to navigate a company like that, and he seemed to have that figured out.
Prior to November 18, 2010, did the defendant ever tell you ever that he was having hallucinations?
No,
Did he ever appear to you that he was having hallucinations?
no, he appeared extremely normal individual.
Did you ever hear anything about him having hallucinations?
No.
Did the defendant ever tell you that he saw or talked to a demon?
No.
Did the defendant ever tell you that he saw or talked to an angel figure?
No.
Did you ever see the defendant prior to November 18, 2010, act illogical or irrational?
Never.
Do you ever see the defendant act manically depressed such that he couldn't function?
No.
Do you ever see him confused?
No.
Do you ever see him act bipolar or to have extreme mood changes?
Never.
Was he pretty stable, pretty solid?
Extremely stable person.
Do you remember, did the defendant ever tell you how many children he had?
Yes.
How many children did he tell you he had?
3.
Did he ever tell you that he thought he had 5?
No.
Did he ever tell you that he thought your children were his children?
No.
Did you discuss your children, however, in a normal course with the defendant?
Yes. Normal conversation, yes.
Did you see anything prior to November 18, 2010 that made you think the defendant ever departed from reality?
No.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to play an additional clip to the bull run right after the other. The first is 5-1 and the second is 5-2.
You may.
Now, when you got back from England,
Yes.
what was the situation or what was the circumstance to your relationship with Rusty at the time? How were you getting along with Rusty?
We were getting along just fine, but it was a stressful time with the amount of, I had been traveling, but I had been away from home. He had daddy duty for most of that time, and we were in the process of trying to figure out how to make that easier. And so there were some stressful conversations about the hours I was working, that I was being asked to work. The projects seemed more complicated and taking more of my time, that I was traveling more often. There were conversations about how he was starting this company and that he couldn't be the one to pick up the children at, so early in the day, that he needed a full day's work. So we were really trying to work through how to deal with that kind of situation. It was pretty stressful because I was starting a new career and told I was doing a great job. And
Okay. Were you and Rusty arguing at the time?
I think we have one argument. We don't argue. That's not really our style. We're more of a discussion-oriented couple than an arguing couple. But we did have maybe 1 or 2 arguments during this span of time.
Yeah. Okay. When you returned from England with the defendant, were you aware that the defendant, shortly after you returned, left his wife and his children?
He did tell me that. I don't know exactly what time that is, but I know that he moved out of the house, yes. He told me and several other people.
Did the defendant...
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I have one more clip to play identified as 7-1.
You may.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm moving forward to November 18th. Rusty is at the Dunwoody Prep School. It may be the obvious, but please tell me why Rusty was at the Dunwoody Prep School.
He took Ian to school
Did he do that every morning or most mornings?
most mornings.
And did he do that about that same time?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea how the defendant would know that?
No. Only if he was watching my house for weeks in advance.
That morning, did you get a phone call from the daycare?
Yeah.
What did they tell you?
Really didn't tell me anything. They said there has been an accident.
I'm sorry, just speak up a little, please.
They said there had been an accident, that Ian was fine, but there had been an accident.
And the accident specifically was directed to Rusty? Or did they tell you?
They didn't really tell me.
Okay.
And then I screamed into the phone asking what was going on. And they just said, you need to come here. So I dropped the phone and ran out of my office.
Did you, prior to dropping the phone, did they clarify it was Rusty or they didn't tell you?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I presumed it was Rusty. I don't know whether they actually said. Maybe they said it has something to do with Rusty. I don't remember.
Did they at any time tell you what had happened to Rusty?
Nope.
Okay. And yeah, I think you just told me, were you at work when you got that call?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember who it was that called you?
Yes.
Who was it, ma'am?
Donna. She's the one. I don't remember her last name, but she's the one that's sort of the manager of the daycare.
So she's someone that you were familiar with?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you just said you ran out a moment ago, but when they called you, you ran out. What did you do? Where did you go?
Ran to the parking lot, to my car. I ran down the stairs. And I ran to the parking lot. I got in my car and I drove. I made several phone calls.
Do you remember who you called?
My parents. My brother, Rusty's parents.
Okay, Rusty's parents. Do you remember who you talked to?
Yeah, I talked to Rusty's dad.
Okay, Don Sneiderman?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead. You said what to Don Sneiderman?
I said, something's happened to Rusty. I have no idea what, and that's all I said. And I was belligerent on the phone.
Okay, at the time you called Don Sneiderman, at that time, did you know what had happened to Rusty?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know what happened to Rusty until I got to the emergency room.
Okay.
No one told me what happened to Rusty.
Who else did you call when you were on the way to the daycare?
I don't remember, but evidently I tried to call Hemi, probably to tell him I had left the office and that something had happened, which seemed was a very normal thing for me to have done, was to tell my boss that I had left the office and something had happened to my husband.
Do you remember what his cell number was at the time?
No, I don't.
Okay. If I read it, would you remember it?
No, because I'm sure I had it on speed dial on my phone, so there's no chance I could have remembered his phone number.
Okay.
Okay?
Do you remember your cell number at the time? Let me ask you, was it 404-371-1931?
I don't remember. That sounds right. I had it for a very short period of time,
Okay.
but that sounds right.
Do you remember how many times you called Rusty within that first 10 minutes? I mean, not Rusty, I'm sorry. How many times you called the defendant during that first 10 minutes?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I'm sure I tried to reach him to tell him that I was on my way and that something had happened.
Did you leave him a message?
Don't know.
Okay.
I barely could have my foot on the gas pedal and go fast enough.
Did you ever attempt to call the defendant's office phone to see if he was there?
I don't know. I don't know what number I pressed on the phone. I rarely use his office phone. I don't think very many people do. I mean, that's just not how you get a hold of him. He's never in his office.
And I think you've just stated this, but did you know prior to arriving to the daycare what had happened to Rusty?
No.
Okay. From leaving work to arriving at the daycare, I think you said you presumed or they indicated that something had happened to Rusty.
Right.
How many times did you call Rusty?
Call Rusty?
Rusty.
0 times.
Why didn't you call Rusty?
Because they just told me something had happened to Rusty. What are the chances that he's going to be answering his cell phone?
They didn't tell you what happened to Rusty.
You have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, why did you call Rusty?
Is that the question?
No, ma'am.
Let's ask questions.
Yes, sir. When you left the daycare, where did you go? Let me back up. You arrived at the daycare, correct? How long did you stay there?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember if you went inside?
Yep, I was taken inside. I pulled up in my vehicle to caution tape and police cars and Rusty's car, but no Rusty.
Okay.
I fell out of the vehicle. I was picked up by I don't know who and taken inside.
Was it a police officer? Do you remember?
No idea.
Okay. And when you were taken inside, did you talk to anybody, or did someone talk to you, or do you remember?
I remember one of Sophia's, they sat me down in this office that they have, this little office room. I remember one of Sophia's teachers, Katrina is her name, and she came in, she was hugging me, couldn't let me go. No one was talking. No one was saying a word. No one would tell me what happened. And then eventually, Gary Cordolino from the Dunwoody Police Department sat down in front of me and started asking me questions. Asked.
Do you remember how long that lasted, ma'am?
Felt like 3 seconds, but I have no idea.
And at that time, did you leave the daycare?
Eventually, my parents came from Roswell. I was on the phone with them almost the entire way to the daycare. I was on the phone with them on the entire way to the daycare.
Yes, ma'am.
They were keeping me company in the car because I was beside myself.
Yes, ma'am.
No time to call Rusty in there.
Yes, ma'am. When you left the daycare,
My parents picked me up and took me home. I was heard that we were instructed, my brother was also there, that we were instructed to go home. So,
by whom?
I have no idea. A police officer, I presume. You'd have to ask my mother or my brother.
Okay. Did they tell you where Rusty was?
Nope. They said they didn't know where he was being taken.
So did you go to the house?
Yep. Went to the house. I was in a fairly catatonic state. My dad and my brother started making phone calls to all the local hospitals.
Okay.
And they eventually got a hold of, I don't know, whatever the hospital is, Atlanta Medical Center.
Yes, ma'am.
And they wouldn't tell my dad anything but that he was being taken there. So we got in the car and we left.
To go to Atlanta Medical?
That's correct.
Okay. Was Ian still at the daycare?
Yes, he was, and that was instructed that was the best idea, was to keep him at the daycare.
Who instructed you that?
The, Donna, the woman that runs the daycare.
And you left him there?
Yep, that's the safest place for him to be. I had no idea what was going on. I'm sorry, so then we went home, and after we went home and we left the Atlanta Medical Center, Detective Thompson...
Let's go back to the medical center. You indicated a minute ago, or a few minutes ago, that that's where you found...
Yeah, I want to go back even further than that, I guess.
Answer my question, and then we'll go back. When you were...
Let's ask questions. Next question, Counselor.
Yes, sir. When you went to the Atlanta Medical Center, ma'am, did you find out what had happened to Rusty?
They took me into what I call the death room.
Okay, so take...
I sat in a chair, and someone, I have no idea who they are, came over and said that he came in with multiple gunshot wounds and that he was dead. I don't remember anything they said after that.
Okay, so you
I
found...
fell to the floor.
You found out at the hospital that Rusty had been shot?
That's correct.
Okay, and you say the death room. At that point, did they tell you or indicate to you Rusty was in fact dead?
Yep.
Okay, is that the first time you found out he was dead?
Yep.
Call your next witness.
United States calls Donald Sneiderman.
solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you should give to the court is basically the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You may go ahead and you may be seated, sir. Sir, if you would, please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Donald Sneiderman. Donald is D-O-N-A-L-D. Sneiderman is S-N-E-I-D-E-R-M-A-N.
Mr. Sneiderman, who is Russell Sneiderman to you?
He is my son.
And did Russell, your son, go by any name other than Russell?
He was always called Rusty.
Everybody called him Rusty?
Everybody called him Rusty.
When he was a kid?
When he was born,
When he was grown?
when he was grown, everybody called him Rusty.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, please, how old was Rusty when he died?
36.
I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit into the microphone, okay? Thank you. How old was Rusty when he died?
36.
And where did Rusty live at the time that he died?
Time of his death, he lived in Dunwoody, Georgia.
Who did he live with in Dunwoody?
His 2 children and his wife,
Who was his wife?
Andrea Sneiderman.
That the defendant's name at the table?
Yes,
And who are his children?
Sophia and Ian.
How old were Sophia and Ian in December of 2010?
Ian was just 2, and Sophia would be 5.
Now, where do you live?
I live in Cleveland, Ohio.
And is that where Rusty grew up?
Yes,
Okay. Who do you live with?
I live with my wife, Marilyn,
And who is Marilyn Sneiderman to Rusty?
his mother.
Do you have any other children?
Yes, I have a son, Steve.
Steve older or younger than Rusty?
He's older.
And where does Steve live?
He lives in Solon, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland.
Your Honor, I've already shown State's Exhibit number 50 to defense counsel, and if I may, I'd like to approach the witness.
You may.
Mr. Sneiderman, I'm showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 50. Do you recognize what State's Exhibit number 50 is?
Yes,
How do you recognize it?
it's a picture of Rusty, Steve, and I at the Masters.
Do you know approximately when that picture was taken?
2009's Masters.
And is that a fair and accurate representation of what Rusty Sneiderman, your son Steve Sneiderman, and you looked like in 2009?
Yes,
Your Honor, I'd like to tender and admit State's Exhibit number 50.
Whose witness is this going to be?
It is mine, Your Honor.
Mr. Clegg, any objection?
Yes, sir. In light of the nature of the charges, I'm not sure of the relevance of this particular photograph.
Why is this relevant, counsel?
And the witness has testified about the relationship between himself, the decedent Rusty Sneiderman, and another individual, Steve Sneiderman. So it's not necessary to come in, but I think it is relevant for the witness in describing his testimony.
I'm going to sustain the objection. It will not come in at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How close was your relationship with Rusty?
really close.
Define or describe what you mean by really close.
We talked almost every day. We talked over the internet.
And how do you talk over the internet?
There's a program called Skype, and we dial each other up, and we talk. There's a video camera, so we get to see him, and he gets to see us.
And did Rusty come to visit you in Ohio?
Yes.
Prior to his death, what was the last time he came to see you in Ohio?
He was there middle of July
Of 2010?
of 2010.
Who did he come with to visit you in July?
He brought Sophia and Ian. Andrea was on a trip to Minden, Nevada.
Did you and your wife come to Atlanta to visit him?
Yes.
How often did you come?
3-4 times a year.
At the time that Rusty died, did you have any pending trips to Atlanta?
Yes, we were coming for Thanksgiving.
And how far away was Thanksgiving from the day that Rusty died?
About a week.
Was there a regular time that you would Skype with Rusty?
Usually when he called, we would usually have breakfast with him. We would have breakfast with he and Ian sitting at he would sit at their kitchen table, and we would sit in our family room, and we would talk while he had breakfast. Usually we would have dinner with them a couple of times a week.
Okay, when you talk about breakfast with them and dinner with them,
They would sit at their table eating dinner, and we would sit in our family room and have dinner.
what did the kids think of that, watching Grandma and Papa eat?
They would they were, 2 years old and 5 years old. It was just one of the things that happened to them.
Are you familiar with Rusty and the defendant's financial situation as it was in November of 2010?
Yes,
What was Rusty doing for employment at that time?
he was working on trying to build this Star voicemail company that he had started. Did some outside consulting. That was about it.
Okay. From what you know, and let me talk a little bit, how is it that you're so familiar with their financial situation?
We share a common stockbroker where all of Rusty's money was, and I did his income tax return, so I know all about what he did.
Okay, well, was Rusty, you said he was 36?
Yes.
At the time he died. Why was it that you were doing his tax returns?
Right now, I'm a retired certified public accountant. I was working then.
Was Rusty interested in finances?
He loved to watch his money.
Okay. And do you share that interest?
Yes,
Was he good at finances?
yes.
All right, Mr. Sneiderman, I want to direct your attention to November 18th, 2010.
Okay.
November 18th, 2010, where were you?
I was in Cleveland,
And who was there with you?
Maryland.
Did you have any contact with Rusty on the morning of November 18th, 2010?
We had breakfast with him from about 8:30 till just a little bit before 9 when he took Ian to school.
Okay. And the way you had breakfast with him, was that the way that you just described over?
Yes.
You were in
I mean,
Cleveland, yeah.
He was sitting in Dunwoody and we were in Cleveland.
Okay. And you mentioned Ian. Was Ian there?
Yes.
What about Sophia? Was Sophia there?
No, Sophia had gone to school.
And what about the defendant? Was the defendant there?
No, she had gone to work.
What time was it that you spoke with him over Skype?
Around 8:30 till about just before 9.
And did you know where Rusty was going when he got off the computer with you?
He was taking Ian to school, and then he had some meeting to go to.
Did Rusty seem any different to you that morning?
No,
Did anything about the events of that morning seem strange, unusual to you?
not at that time.
After you hung up, or the call was disconnected, what did you do?
Went about the normal things we do in the morning.
You mentioned that you're retired.
Yes,
Okay. Did you leave the house that morning?
no,
What about your wife? Was she working at that time?
no,
Was she there with you too?
yes.
What happened next?
Around 9:30, Andrea called, and she was very excited.
Let me stop you. Around 9:30, Andrea called. Is that the defendant?
Yes.
Andrea Sneiderman? Do you have a cell phone?
Yes,
What's your cell phone number?
my cell phone number is 216-849-1630.
And do you also have a landline, a phone that's physically at your house?
Yes,
And what's that number?
216-464-4260.
Okay. And which one of these numbers did Andrea call you on?
She called me on my house phone.
And do you know from what phone she was calling you?
I believe it was her cell phone, because she was in the car.
All right, so I'm sorry, tell me again, what time did this call come in?
About 9:30.
About 9:30? Okay. And what, if anything, do you remember about the conversation?
She called, she was very excited. Her voice was very high-pitched, and she said that Rusty had been shot. She was so sorry, and that she was going to Dunwoody Prep to find out exactly what had happened.
Rusty had been shot, and what was the next part?
I'm so sorry.
And where was she on her way to?
She was on her way to Dunwoody Prep.
Are you certain of the words that she used?
Absolutely.
Have you in your life ever heard news like this before?
Never.
What was your reaction?
I didn't believe it.
Why didn't you believe her?
Who would shoot Rusty?
This was what time in the morning?
About 9:30.
What else did you say anything to Andrea when she called and told
I
you?
told her to call me back as soon as she knew something.
And then what?
She hung up.
How long can you estimate this phone call lasted?
30 seconds, 40 seconds. I have no concept as to time. It was just going on.
Had you talked to Andrea at any time earlier that day?
No,
Had you talked to her the day before?
don't think so.
So after this call, what did you do?
Well, after I tried to get my brains together, I waited a little bit, and I called Dunwoody Prep to find out really what happened.
Did you call anybody else?
Not before Dunwoody Prep.
Did you have the number for Dunwoody Prep?
No,
How did you get it? Do you know?
I think I called information.
Okay. When Andrea said Dunwoody Prep, did you know what that meant?
Yes,
Okay, how did you know that?
I've been there. Took Ian when we were down visiting, we would take Ian or Sophia to school there. Both of the kids went there.
So you knew it by name,
Yes,
and you knew it as a place where Ian was at school.
yes,
Did you call Rusty?
yes,
After you hung up the phone with Andrea, you did attempt to call Rusty?
Yes.
Did you get a hold of him?
no,
What happened to the call, do you know?
didn't answer.
No one answered. How long did you wait before you called Dunwoody Prep?
About 20 minutes.
And did anyone answer when you called?
Yes,
Do you know who it was you spoke to?
no.
What did you say when you called?
We identified, Marilyn and I identified ourselves, that we were Rusty's parents. We heard that something had happened to him. And they told me then that they confirmed that he had been shot.
And you said you asked Dunwoody Prep what happened. Did you tell them that Andrea had told you that he had been shot?
No,
What were you looking for when you called Dunwoody Prep?
I think I was looking for the fact that Andrea was wrong. They told us that he was not in good shape, and they told us, we had asked if the woman that we were talking to thought we should get on a plane and come to Atlanta, and she said yes. And someone in the background told us that they had taken him to the Atlanta Medical Center and gave us the phone number. And we hung up from there.
Did anyone at Dunwoody Prep indicate to you, or was it your impression that Andrea was there at the time?
Nobody's...
No one said anything about that?
No.
So when you hung up the phone with Dunwoody Prep, what was your reaction?
Well, we were still in shock, that he was shot. We started making plans to go to Atlanta.
You had made up your mind at that time?
We were going.
What kind of things did you do?
Went, packed a suitcase, called a friend to pick up the mail, called the newspaper to cancel the paper because I didn't want the newspapers accumulating in the driveway. Sent an email to Steve, my son.
Let me stop you. You said that Steve is your other son. Why did you send an email to Steve?
He was on his way to Hawaii for a vacation for Thanksgiving. And I sent him an email because he was on an airplane, and I figured he would get bored halfway through the flight to Hawaii, and he would sign up to get Wi-Fi, and he would access his email.
Do you remember about what time it was that you sent an email to Steve?
A little after 10.
You know, I've already shown defense counsel what's been identified as State's Exhibit number 51. May I push
You may.
Mr. Sneiderman, I'm showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 51 is.
Yes,
And how do you recognize it?
it's the email from me to Steve telling him that Rusty was shot at Dunwoody Prep.
Okay. And is that your email address?
Yes,
Is it Steve's email address?
yes.
All right, this time I'd tender and seek to admit State's Exhibit number 51.
Any objection, Mr. Clerk?
No, sir, none whatsoever.
All right, 51's admitted without objection. You may publish it to the jury if you wish.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Steinman, what time was the email that you sent sent your other son, Steve?
10:38
And what day was it?
on Thursday, November the 18th, 2010.
All right, and at this time, can you tell me who had you spoken to at the time you sent that email to Steve? Who had you spoken to about about what had happened to Rusty?
When I sent that, I just think I talked to Dunwoody Prep
And the defendant?
and the defendant.
When did you next hear from Andrea?
The next time I heard from Andrea was later that morning, a little after lunchtime. She called me to ask permission to bury Rusty in Atlanta.
After you sent that email to Steve at, what was the time, 10:38?
Yes.
Okay. What, if anything, did you do then?
I waited what I thought was a reasonable time, and then I called the Atlanta Medical Center.
Okay, and why did you wait any time to call the Atlanta Medical Center?
I got the impression from Dunwoody Prep that the Atlanta Medical Center was not around the corner. So, and I was hoping I would be able to talk to somebody and they would tell me that he was okay. So I waited a little bit, then I called the Atlanta Medical Center, and the guy on the other end of the phone told me that Rusty had come in with multiple gunshot wounds and that he could not have survived.
Are you certain that's what the man said?
Yes.
Did they just tell you this information when you called?
No, they got permission from somebody there, from Andrea, I guess, it was okay to talk to me on the phone.
Initially, when you called and identified yourself, did they give you any information?
No,
And did they keep you on hold for a time?
not very long.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know.
Was it your understanding they were asking permission to give
Yes.
you information on the phone? And what time was this call to the Atlanta Medical Center?
Probably close to 11.
11 a.m.?
Yes. Sometime between 10:38 and 11.
And how are you certain it was between 10:38 and 11?
Well, when I sent the email to Stephen, I didn't know that Rusty was dead.
At the time you sent the email to Stephen at 10:38, had you talked to Dunwoody Prep at that time?
Yes.
Now, I've previously shown Mr. Clegg what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 52. May I approach the witness?
You may.
What did you do after you got off the phone with the Atlanta Medical Center?
I sent an email to Steve telling him that Rusty had died.
I handed you State's Exhibit number 52. Do you recognize what State's Exhibit number 52 is?
Yes. It is that email.
Is that your email address?
Yes.
Is it Steve's email address?
Yes.
Is that email a true and accurate, complete representation of the email that you sent to Steve?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit State's Exhibit number 52.
Any objection?
No, sir.
It's a matter without objection. You may publish it to the jury if you wish.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Can you read the content of the email that you sent to Steve?
Yeah, it says Rusty passed away this morning. Don't know anything else.
What time was that email sent?
11:06.
All right, from the time you received the phone call from Andrea at approximately 9:30 to the time that you spoke to the Atlanta Medical Center and then sent the email to Steve shortly after 11, did you speak with anyone else about Rusty's condition?
Called my stockbroker, who had called me in the middle of all of this, and I was very rude to him, so I called him back to tell him that Rusty had passed away and that I was leaving town. I called a friend to pick up the mail. I called the newspaper to cancel the newspaper. Made plans with AirTran to go to come down to Atlanta. Called a cousin. Sent an email to my older brother who's teaching school, and I knew he wouldn't answer his phone, so email was the best way to get to him. That's about it. That's all I can remember.
Right. Are you certain of the order in which you did all of those things that you just described doing?
No.
Are there some details you're more certain about than others?
Yeah, I know who I called. I just don't know if I called one guy before the other. I do know that I called the broker first because I had hung up the phone on him in the middle of a sentence. Just told him I couldn't talk to him, and I just hung up.
Are you certain about the content of the call with Andrea?
Absolutely.
If you're unsure about other details, how are you so certain about that one?
There are some calls that you will never forget. That's one of them. The other one is the doctor who told me that Rusty could not have survived the multiple gunshot wounds.
Is it possible during this period that you had any contact with Andrea's mother?
No.
Do you recall any contact with Andrea's father?
No.
Do you recall any contact with Andrea's brother?
No.
Okay. Is it possible that you spoke to any one of these people?
I don't remember them at all.
Okay. What then did you do after you sent the email to Steve, letting him know what had happened shortly after 11 o'clock? What do you do then?
Well, we packed, repacked actually, took some funeral clothes, made plans to go to Atlanta.
Do you remember what time you got on the flight?
Around 2. I don't remember the exact time. Things get blurry when you're under a lot of stress like that, but 2 o'clock we arrived here sometime close to 4.
You mentioned stress. Were you stressed that morning before you got the call from Andrea?
No.
You mentioned another call with Andrea, the defendant, on that day. Was that before or after you got on the plane?
That was before.
Okay. And tell the jury about that conversation. Were you still at your house?
Yes.
Did she call you on the landline or the cell phone?
I believe she called me on my cell phone. And she asked me for permission to bury Rusty here in Atlanta so that she and the children could visit his grave, and I said yes.
Was this a long conversation?
No.
Can you estimate how long it was?
30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute.
What was her demeanor when she was talking to you?
She was crying and upset.
What was your demeanor when you were talking to her?
I was crying and upset.
Once you got to Atlanta, what happened next?
Rented a car and drove out to Dunwoody. Went into the house.
How long did you stay in Atlanta?
We arrived on Thursday, went home on Wednesday. Almost a week.
And where did you stay while you were here?
My daughter-in-law Lisa made reservations for me at the Marriott at the Perimeter.
All right, let me move a little bit away from November 18th. Up until the arrest of Hemi Newman on January 4th, 2011, what was your communication and your relationship with the defendant like?
It was very hard to reach her. Most of our phone calls were screened by her mother or father, and very few phone calls that we talked to her. Did talk to her occasionally, but not often.
What about your communication with the kids, Sophia and Ian, during that time?
There was none.
After the arrest of Hemi Newman on January 4th, 2011, what was your communication and your relationship with the defendant like?
On January 4th, 2011, the night that Mr. Newman was arrested, we had a call from the Dunwoody police informing us that he had been arrested, and about 2 or 3 hours later, Andrea called and again said she was so sorry, and I asked her on that call if she had lied to me, and her brother said we're hanging up the phone, so we had very, very little communication after that date.
That phone call you just described, that was January 4th,
Yes.
2011?
Yes.
After that point, January 4th, 2011, did you still attempt to have some relationship with the defendant?
We talked occasionally, but not very often. I did her tax return and Rusty's tax return for them. There was some communication then, but that was about it.
You talked before, what's your profession? What was your profession?
I'm a retired certified public accountant.
The communication you had with Andrea...
Victims Crime Commission. In Ohio, we have a similar one, and they have some significant death benefits. So I contacted them to see if there was any benefits that would accrue to her or the children.
Why was it that it would occur to you to seek out, I guess, financial benefits for...
That's what I do. I mean, my career was always based on money, so I look out for people's money.
Okay. What else, if anything, did you do to try to look out for the defendant and the kids?
I had my broker prepare a proposal for her, knowing that she was going to get $2 million in life insurance. I had him work up a proposal for what kind of investments he would put her in, what he would charge her, what her income yield would be, and he sent that down to her.
Anything else you can think of that you tried to do? What else would it have occurred to you to assist with?
In one of our phone calls, I suggested that she at least contact Social Security to start getting the process for benefits for the kids.
And to your knowledge, did she act on any of your suggestions or take any of your advice?
I know she changed brokers, and eventually she did get her Social Security benefits, so that's all I know.
And do you know if she received the insurance benefits?
I believe she did.
All right, Mr. Sneiderman, I'm going to ask you something else. Has there been any litigation between you and the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jury just a little bit about that.
We filed a suit against her for visitation rights to see my grandchildren because she was denying us visitation rights to see the kids when we were here in Atlanta.
Okay. And I don't want you to tell me all the ins and outs of that, but can you tell me what you were seeking with that litigation?
We wanted to be able to visit with the kids, have them come to Cleveland to see us. We would come down here to see them.
Okay. And has that litigation been resolved?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any motive in testifying today that is other than telling the truth?
Absolutely not.
When did you first tell police or law enforcement or anyone else about the conversation you had with Andrea that morning?
I believe I talked to Don Gary in March of 2012, after the trial for Hemi Newman.
I'm showing you what I'm going to mark as State's Exhibit number 53. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may. What number did you say, 53?
I did say 53.
All right.
I'm showing you, Mr. Simon, what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 53. Do you recognize what it is?
Yes.
Okay. And I want you to read the content of it right now, but I do want you to let me know how do you recognize what State's 53 is?
This is an email I sent to Don Gary.
And who's Don Gary?
He is the former assistant district attorney here in DeKalb County, who handled the Hemi Newman trial.
Okay. And what was the date of that email?
May 25th, 2011.
Okay. And again, without telling me the contents of it, what was the topic?
We had talked about the phone call from Andrea to me a couple of times, and he had called and said he would like some documentation from me in writing about what the call was. So I drafted this email and sent it to him.
Prior to your conversation with Mr. Geary, did you know that or attach any significance other than the personal significance to you? Did you attach any significance to the call and the content of the call from Andrea?
No.
You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
My colleagues brought something to my attention, Mr. Sneiderman, I think we talked about, but we didn't publish for the jury the content of the email from exhibit. I'm sorry, Your Honor, may I push the witness?
You may.
Thank you. That states exhibit number 51. And I'm sorry if you would keep that in front of you. And Your Honor, I believe it's been tendered and admitted but not published.
You may publish it if you wish.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
You publish states exhibit number 51, please. You don't have to look at the screen. So you will have to look at the screen. Are you able to read behind you what that says?
I can see it here.
Okay, thank you. And can you read that for the jurors, please?
Yes, it says Rusty was shot outside Dunwoody Prep this morning. We know no details at this time other than he was shot. He's being taken to Atlanta Medical Center. As this is being written, Mom and I will be flying there this afternoon. Don't know what else to tell you. Call me when you can on my cell phone. We should have some information by then.
And what time was that email sent?
10:38.
And Mr. Snedman, I'm going to also publish to the jury with the court's permission states exhibit number 52.
You may. It's submitted without objection.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Simon, can you read that email on the screen in front of you?
Yeah, it says Rusty passed away this morning. Don't know anything else.
What time was that email?
11:06, I think.
November 18th?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you, I was just trying to see when your last break was, and I think you've been going about, make sure. Yes, this would be a great time for a short break. Mr. Deputy, if you could assist me and let them step into the jury room. It'll be in the neighborhood of 10 minutes. 10 minutes, boy.
All right.
All rise. Lord. Good afternoon. You may be seated. And Ms. Green, I'm sorry, Ms. Cross, have you completed your questioning?
I have,
Ms. Clegg, you may cross-examine if you wish.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Sneiderman, my name is Tom Clegg. I am one of Andrea's attorneys, and I have a number of questions for you, sir. If you have any difficulty understanding what I am saying, please let me know, and I'll do my best to rephrase it or make it more comprehensible, okay?
Okay?
Did I hear you correctly to say that on the morning of the 18th, you returned a call to your stockbroker?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What time would that have been, sir?
Would have been after I was told Rusty had died, so it would have been after 11.
But you would have obviously let Steve know prior to returning that phone call,
Steve
right?
was my first contact.
Now, if I understand correctly, well, let me ask you this. When is it that Andrea and Rusty met?
I believe when Rusty was a sophomore at Indiana.
And what year would that have been, if you recall, sir?
Graduated in 84, about 1985.
If you could just try to speak up so we can...
About 1985.
When?
85.
85?
No. I got to think about when he graduated from high school and when he graduated from college.
Okay, again, we need to be able to hear you, and I apologize, my hearing is not the best. So when is it that Rusty and Andrea...
When he was a sophomore at Indiana University.
Yes, sir. And what year, again, would that have been?
Be 94.
And was Andrea a student at the Indiana University as well?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at that time, your family was living in the Cleveland area?
We still do.
Okay, and have lived there continuously since, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. Did you meet Andrea while she and Rusty were dating in college?
Yes.
Can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how many times you would have met her while they were still in college?
5, 6.
And what would the circumstances be? Would you guys go to Indiana University and meet with Rusty and Andrea, or would they come to your home?
Both of them. She was at our house a couple times.
Can you recall for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how many times Andrea would have been a guest in your home while she and Rusty were still in college?
It would be 2 or 3 times, and then she worked in Cleveland one summer.
When is it that she lived in Cleveland, sir?
I believe right after her junior year.
Okay. And that was while she was still in college, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
And would that have been when Rusty had finished his college
Yes.
education? Okay. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Was Rusty a year or so ahead of Andrea?
Yes.
So when he's a sophomore,
She's a freshman.
correct?
Yes.
And do you remember or recall how it is that they were supposed to have met?
They met at the Hillel.
Okay, and is that a Jewish student organization?
Yes.
Okay. You are Jewish, your wife is Jewish, Andrea is Jewish, her
Yes.
parents are Jewish, correct? Okay. During the summer when she was living in Cleveland, was Rusty living at your house?
Yes.
Okay. Was Andrea living at your house?
No, she had an apartment.
Was Andrea a frequent guest at your home during that particular summer, sir?
Yes.
Can you estimate for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the number of times that she was a frequent guest?
20, 25.
Okay. Did she and Rusty seem to get along well?
Yes.
Okay. Did you like Andrea back then?
Yes.
Were they, in your opinion, well suited to one another?
Yes.
And at some point after Andrea graduated from college, did Rusty stay in Cleveland or did he go somewhere else?
They moved, after Andrea graduated from Indiana, they moved to Chicago, lived together in Chicago.
And what was Rusty doing at that time, if you know?
He was a consultant for Deloitte.
Okay. And what was Andrea doing at that time, if you
She
know?
was doing computer consulting for Deloitte also.
So they were both working for the same company, is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And were they living together in Chicago?
Yes.
Did you and your wife have occasion to go visit them in Chicago
Yes,
while they were living there?
yes.
Can you estimate the number of times that you would have visited them in Chicago?
3 or 4,
How long were they in Chicago for, sir, if you recall?
about 2 years.
Did they ever come visit from Chicago to Cleveland during that period of time?
Yes,
And when I say they, I mean Rusty and Andrea.
yes,
If Rusty came, would Andrea come with him?
yes,
Were they, during that period of time, inseparable?
yes,
Did they appear to you to have a very good relationship with one another?
yes.
At some point, did Rusty move to the Boston, Massachusetts area?
Yes.
Do you recall when that would have been, sir?
He just had his 20th anniversary of his graduation, so that would have been 12, yeah, been about 90, 94, something like that.
You think they would have moved to Boston around 1994?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, I apologize, maybe I misunderstood. I thought you had said earlier that you had thought Rusty and Andrea met around 1994. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, so he would have been later. He would have been, it would have been 2000 when they moved there.
You don't recall the exact year that they actually moved to Boston, is that correct?
Should be 2000.
Okay. And did Rusty go to Harvard Business School?
Yes.
How long does it take to complete the course
2
of
years.
study?
2 years. He graduated in 2002.
Okay. And at some point, did Andrea and Rusty get married?
Yes.
When did they get married, sir?
They would have been married in 2001 on December 30th.
December 30th of 2001. Okay. So would it be fair to say that their 10th anniversary would have been on December 30th of the year 2011?
Just after Rusty passed away.
I'm sorry, what?
Just after Rusty died.
Okay. Well, Rusty died in 2010, did he not, sir?
Yes. So it would have been.
Now, I'm presuming that you were at the wedding. It was at Palm Beach, or West Palm Beach?
Yes.
And let me ask you this. On December 30th of the year 2010, what contact did you have with Andrea?
None.
None. Okay. That would have been her 10th anniversary to Rusty, right?
Yes.
Did you make any attempt to communicate with her at all on that day?
She had gone to Florida with her parents, and no, we did not.
Okay. Did you attempt to communicate with her, sir, in any way on that day?
No.
You did know, however, that it was her 10th wedding anniversary, correct?
Yes.
Now, when is it that Rusty and Andrea moved to Atlanta?
After he graduated from Harvard.
And do you recall the year that he would have graduated from Harvard, sir?
2002.
And where did they live in Atlanta when they first got here?
They bought a house and lived out in Smyrna.
And did you come down to visit them on a frequent or regular basis?
Yes.
When I say regular basis, could you tell us how often you and your family would have come down to visit? I guess it's you and your wife at that point, right?
Yes.
Okay. Steve would have been older than Rusty, is that correct?
Yes.
So by the time Andrea and Rusty are living in Atlanta, when the family comes down, it's you and your wife, Marilyn, correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Can you estimate the number of times for us that you guys would have come down to visit Rusty and Andrea?
3 or 4 times a year.
3 or 4 times a year? Were there occasions when they came up to Cleveland?
Yes.
How often would they come up to Cleveland?
2 or 3 times a year.
Did you notice during that period of time any sort of tension or difficulty between the two?
No.
Did they appear to be happy with one another?
Yes.
Did they appear to be in love with one another?
Yes.
Did they appear to be very much in love with one another?
I would just say that they were in love.
Okay.
Very much is subjective.
At some point they had 2 children, right?
Yes.
I guess Sophia is the older, correct?
Yes.
When was she born?
She was 5 in 2010, so she would have been born in 2005.
Okay. So what, do you recall her birthday?
August 25th.
Okay, and how about Ian? When was he born, sir?
He would have been 2 in 2010, so he would have been born in 2008. His birthday is on October 18th.
Okay. Now, I'm sorry, what day?
October 18th.
Okay. Now, you came down, I presume, after the birth of the children to see the new grandkids, right?
Yes?
And did your visits become more frequent once the grandkids were born, or did they remain about the same?
About the same.
Okay. And during that period of time, did Andrea and Rusty appear to be in love with one another?
Yes?
Did both of them appear to be devoted to their children?
Yes?
Does that include both Rusty and Andrea?
Yes?
Have you ever known a time when Andrea did not appear to be devoted to her children?
Nope.
You were going to come to Atlanta in November of 2010 for Thanksgiving. Is that correct, sir?
Yes?
Do you recall the day that you would have been scheduled to arrive?
I think we had talked about driving down, and we would come down on Wednesday, before Thanksgiving.
Do you recall ever having been asked by either Rusty or Andrea to help take care of the kids on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving?
No.
You do not recall ever receiving an email from Rusty in that regard?
No.
Did you have any other trips planned with Andrea and Rusty for a date beyond November the 18th of 2010?
We had a tentative plan to go to Disney World with the kids and them.
Okay. And who were you planning to go to Disney World with?
Rusty, Andrea, Sophia, and Ian.
Okay. So it would have been Andrea, Rusty, Ian, and Sophia?
Yes.
Okay. And were you and your wife going to go?
Yes.
Do you know if the Greenbergs, Andrea's parents, were going to go?
I do not believe they were going.
Okay. Did you in fact go?
No.
When is it that these plans had been discussed to go to Disney World?
In October?
October of 2010?
Yes.
And when is it, if you recall, sir, when is it that the trip to Disney World, the proposed trip to Disney World, was going to take place?
I believe it was in March.
Okay. So in October of 2010, you are communicating with Andrea and Rusty, correct?
Yes.
And they are discussing with you and your wife, Marilyn, the prospect of all of you taking the two kids to Disney World in March of the following year. Is
Yes.
that correct? To your knowledge, was Andrea aware of that plan?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you about November the 18th. You are home at that time, is that correct?
Yes.
You have Skyped with Rusty that morning, correct?
Yes.
That was something you did frequently, was it not?
Almost every day.
Okay. And when you would Skype with Rusty every day, how often would you typically Skype for?
Half hour in the morning.
Okay. So you would have been aware of what was going on in Rusty's life because you're literally coming into contact with him every day, correct?
Yes.
He was not employed at that time, was he, sir?
No.
He was trying to start up a new business called Star Voicemail, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You were familiar with that business, correct?
Yes.
To your knowledge, was Andrea familiar with that business?
Yes.
To your knowledge, was Andrea involved in helping that business get off the ground?
Yes.
Can you tell us, if you know, the extent of the effort that Andrea was making to help the business get off the ground?
No, I can't. I know she was involved, and I know that they talked about it, but I can't tell you that she spent 2 hours a week, or 4 hours a week, or 12 hours a week.
Okay. But you basically, when you said 2 hours a week, 4 hours a week, 12 hours a week, it was some period of time from what you understood
Yes.
every week. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Now, during that period of time, and how long had you been Skyping for 30 minutes every day, sir?
Since Sophia was about a year old, so that's about 5 years at that time.
Okay, so for a long time, correct?
Long time,
Okay.
every day.
And now did you Skype when Rusty and Andrea went on a cruise?
No.
Okay, that would have been when, sir, if you recall?
That would have been the week before Rusty died.
Okay. But you were aware that they were going on that cruise, is that correct?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did they bring Sophia and Ian along with them, or did they just go off by themselves?
They left Ian at home with her parents.
Okay. So you had been in touch with your son literally every day, with some exceptions, obviously the cruise being one, for an extended period of time, correct?
Yes,
And you were aware of what was going on with his life, right?
yes,
Were you aware of any problems between he and Andrea on November 17th of 2010?
no,
Now, you get a phone call from Andrea on the morning of November the 18th of 2010, correct?
yes,
You had said you had Skyped earlier that morning with Rusty, and then you were doing what you normally did.
yes,
You were retired at that time, sir, correct?
yes,
How long had you been retired at that time?
about 3 years.
What did you normally do after your retirement? What did you normally do in the morning when you didn't have to get up and go to work anymore?
After I had breakfast with Rusty, I might have another cup of coffee, I might read the newspaper, look at the television, do almost anything that you would do around your house.
Okay. Do you have a specific recollection of that particular morning, November the 18th, between the time when you would have stopped the Skype session with Rusty and when you would have gotten the phone call from Andrea?
Nothing special, just the
There is
normal stuff.
nothing about that particular morning prior to getting the phone call that sticks out,
Nope.
correct? So while you have just said, here's what you might do, you do not know specifically what you had done that morning, correct?
No, I don't.
Was your wife at your home with you?
Yes,
And you get this call. How long does the call last?
30 seconds, 40 seconds, very short time.
Okay. And you said Andrea's voice was excited.
Yes,
Okay.
high-pitched and squeaky.
What?
High-pitched and squeaky,
High-pitched and squeaky.
very excited voice.
Did she appear to be panicked?
No,
Now, high-pitched and squeaky sounds like someone who has just won a new car on Let's Make a Deal. Was that the kind of voice we're describing, sir?
we're describing somebody who's very excited.
Okay. Did there appear to be any sort of anxiety in her voice?
No, she was just excited.
Okay. Did she appear to be upset?
No,
Okay.
just
She
excited.
said, okay, so no, she wasn't upset, she wasn't excited, she didn't appear to be panic-stricken, is that correct?
No, I said she was excited, not panic-stricken.
Okay. And how long did you talk to her for, actually?
I said about 35, maybe 30, 40 seconds.
Okay. She said something to the effect of, Rusty's been shot, I'm so sorry, correct?
Yes, sir.
What did you say in response?
She said she was going to Dunwoody Prep. I said, when you get to Dunwoody Prep, call me and tell me what's happening.
Okay. Did you ask any questions as to the circumstances under which Rusty had been shot?
No,
Did you ask any questions concerning how many times Rusty had been shot?
I assume she didn't know because she didn't tell me, so
I'm not asking that, sir. I'm asking, did you ask those questions?
no.
Did you ask Andrea if she knew who had shot Rusty?
No,
Why not?
because I assumed she didn't know any more than I do,
Why did you make that assumption?
because I didn't think she was involved in Rusty's shooting.
Okay. And at that time, you didn't even believe her, correct?
No, I did not believe anybody would shoot Rusty.
Okay. So you get a call from your daughter-in-law who tells you that your son has been shot on that morning, and your response is to simply not believe the communication or information she is conveying. Is that correct?
Yes,
I presume you immediately told your wife about this phone call, right?
absolutely.
Okay. And then you attempted to do a couple things to get in touch with folks, right?
Yes,
You attempted to call Rusty, right?
yes,
And you attempted to call Dunwoody Prep after getting their number from Directory Assistance, right?
yes,
You had testified in the trial of Hemi Newman, did you not?
yes.
Did you say anything about trying to call Rusty during the course of that testimony, sir?
I don't think so. I don't think the question was asked.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, good point. Sorry. Just for the purpose of protection. Excuse me, sir, let me get another exhibit sticker.
You may.
Are we up to number 11 now?
I would have to confer with Kelly Carpenter, the court reporter. Kelly Carpenter, what number is he up to?
Number 11, okay, thank you.
Court reporter says it's number 11, therefore it's 11.
Now, do you have a specific recollection of whether or not you testified that you had attempted to call Rusty at Mr. Newman's shop?
I don't think I did.
Okay. Any particular reason why you did not note that particular detail?
Don't think the question was ever asked.
Okay. Do you remember testifying that about 20 minutes or 15 or 20 minutes later you called Dunwoody Prep?
Yes?
Okay. Do you remember being asked the question, after you got this phone call from Andrea, what did you do next? You remember being asked that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember answering, well, we waited a little bit, waited for her to call back?
What's the objection?
Mr. Clegg is reading from a document that hasn't been tendered into evidence. He's trying to refresh the witness's recollection, and you can show him the document and ask the question.
Response?
Your Honor, I'm using it to cross-examine the witness at this time. If the witness indicates that he does not remember the conversation, then I fully expect to attempt to refresh his memory. But I think I'm entitled, I have a good faith basis for asking these particular questions, and he is on cross-examination.
Well, he is on cross-examination, but if you are asking him about a document that you have, and basically, I think you're saying it's testimony he may have provided, you're going to have to show him that document. I'm going to sustain that objection.
Perfectly fine.
All right, you may approach.
Okay. Sir, let me show you what has been marked for purposes of identification as defense exhibit number 11, and you can start reading right here. Just read to yourself, okay? I mean, about line 13, and then read down to line 21, and when you finish reading that to yourself, if you would let us know.
Okay.
Okay. And at that time, I guess, who was doing the examination? Was it Mr. James who was asking you the question?
Yes.
Okay. And he did ask you, after the phone call with Andrea, what did you do next, correct?
Right.
So when you say that you were not asked about Rusty's phone call, the bottom line is you were asked what you did after getting off the phone with Andrea, right?
Yep. Yes, sir.
And the first thing you did, quite frankly, was to try to call Rusty, right?
Yes.
But that was not reflected in your testimony,
Nope.
was it?
Nope.
And in fact, what you said instead was, we waited about 15 to 20 minutes, right?
I waited 15 or that's what this says.
And so you just sat around for 15 or 20 minutes waiting for Andrea to get back in touch?
I guarantee you, Mr. Clegg, we did not just sit around.
I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear you. I apologize, my fault.
We did not just later in the day, yes.
Okay, and was that to put an obituary into the paper?
No. It was to cancel the paper. We were going to Atlanta.
Oh, okay. Now, so you get this phone call, and now at that time, Steve, Rusty's older brother, is on his way to go to a vacation, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you find out early on that Rusty has, you are told by Andrea that Rusty has been shot, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you immediately call Steve and tell him, you might want to hold off a little bit before we figure out what's going on?
No, I waited till I talked to Dunwoody Prep, so I was confirmed that Rusty was shot.
Now, Steve was going on a fairly lengthy vacation, was he not?
Yes?
Steve lived in the Cleveland area, did he not?
Yes?
It was a vacation that would necessitate him flying from Cleveland to O'Hare in Chicago, correct?
Yes?
And then flying to Hawaii, correct?
Yes.
So once he got on the plane to Hawaii, that was going to be a long way to go if he had to turn back around, correct?
Yes, sir.
When is it that you actually communicated anything to Steve?
When he was on the ground, when the plane was leaving Chicago.
Okay. So that was at 10:38, right?
Yes.
Why didn't you attempt to communicate with him earlier than that, sir?
Because I didn't want to alarm him. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew is that I had the phone call from Andrea, and I didn't have a confirmation that he was shot.
Okay.
And I was really trying to find out if he was shot in the leg, toenail, or in his arm, instead of being shot multiple times.
So you had no knowledge at the time you were communicating with Steve, telling him to go on his vacation or not telling him to go on his vacation. Is that correct, sir?
That's right.
Okay. Now, did you have any reason to disbelieve Andrea on that particular morning when she told you that Rusty had been shot?
I didn't believe anybody would shoot my son.
But did you have any specific reason to disbelieve Andrea?
As I've said, I didn't believe that anybody would shoot Rusty, so no, I did not believe that he was shot until I was confirmed by Dunwoody Prep.
I apologize, sir, but let me ask the question one more time. Did you have any reason to disbelieve Andrea?
Nope.
Now, you called Dunwoody Prep, right?
Yes, sir.
Who is it that you spoke to at Dunwoody Prep?
Don't know.
Do you have any idea of the identity of the individual that you spoke to?
No.
Did you ask for that person? Who did you ask for when you called?
Whoever answered the phone is who I talked to.
And did you make any attempt to find out that person's name?
No.
Any particular reason why not?
I didn't care who was answering the phone. I only cared about the condition of my son.
And at that time, what did you ask when somebody picked up the phone?
I identified myself as Rusty's father, and I told him I wanted to know what had happened to Rusty.
Okay. Just to make sure we understand each other here, sir. When you first talked to someone at Dunwoody Prep about Rusty having been shot, is that correct?
That's correct.
You had no time during the course of that conversation when you first picked up the phone, you never said, "Has my son been shot?"
No, I said, and I asked the lady who answered the phone what had happened to Rusty.
You never used the "was that" after the phone call you had had with Andrea Sneiderman.
About 15 or 20 minutes.
And she had definitely used the word, "Rusty has been shot. I'm so, so sorry."
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you talk to, or how did you know to get in touch with Atlanta Medical Center?
Someone at Dunwoody Prep in the background. A male voice said that they had taken Rusty to the Atlanta Medical Center and gave me the phone number.
Okay. And did that person actually get on the phone?
No, he was in the background.
Okay. And you were given the phone by the people at Dunwoody Prep?
Yes.
Or the phone number for Atlanta Medical Center
Yes.
by the people at Dunwoody Prep, correct? Was that person actually on the phone, or you could just hear it in the background?
We could hear him.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, the person actually speaking to you did not give you that information, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you then got in touch with the Atlanta Medical Center, right?
Yes, sir.
Had you heard from Herb Greenberg at any time?
No.
Did Herb Greenberg, Andrea's father, ever call you up and tell you that Rusty had been taken to Atlanta Medical Center?
No.
Did you have any communication with Herb Greenberg at all that morning before finding out that Rusty was deceased?
No.
Did you have any communication with any other member of the Greenberg family that morning before finding out that Rusty was deceased?
No.
You guys got to Atlanta the evening of the 18th, correct?
The afternoon, yes.
And what was Andrea's emotional state at that time?
She was very upset.
I'm sorry?
She was very upset.
Could you describe some of the characteristics of her behavior at that time that led you to draw that conclusion, sir?
She was always in another room. She wasn't with us. She was with her brother or her mother, and they were just holding her, and we didn't really talk to her much.
Was she crying?
I guess so.
Was she shaking?
Didn't see it.
Did you attempt to comfort her?
Weren't allowed near her.
You're not allowed near her?
No.
Okay. Who was it who did not allow you near her?
Her mother, father, and brother.
Okay. Now, You were there the next day when the Dunwoody detective showed up, right?
Yes,
And you were there when they questioned Andrea at length about any information she could provide, correct?
yes,
You were there during the course of the interview when she gave the name of Hemi Newman to the police, were you not?
yes,
And that was in response to a police question, was it not?
yes,
Do you remember the specific question that it was in response to, sir?
no,
Did you subsequently meet Hemi Newman yourself?
yes,
Did you see him at the funeral?
no,
Did you see him when the family was sitting show?
yes,
And I believe we've had one witness describe that, but out of an abundance of caution, is that a Jewish tradition?
yes.
And tell us exactly what that is, sir.
It's a period of mourning that is observed in the house, and people come and pay their respects.
How long does that go on for?
7 days. Well, depends.
Okay.
Usually 7 days.
How long did Andrea's sitting shiva go on for, if you recall?
7 days.
And when does it begin?
Begins the day of the burial.
Which would have been the Sunday after the death of Rusty, which would have been 21st, I guess?
Something like that.
Did you remain for the entirety of that particular period of time?
No,
Now, you had seen Rusty and Andrea and the kids earlier that month, had you not, sir?
yes,
And you had seen them at your mom, was it your mom?
my mother,
Your mother's 95th birthday party in the Washington, D.C. area, right?
yes,
They came in mass, that is, all 4 of them came, right?
yes,
Sophia would have been 5 at that point, Ian would have been 2 at that point, correct?
no, he'd have been 1 3/4 or something.
I'm sorry.
It would have been 1 3/4. No, he would have been 2. His birthday's in October.
Okay, and did you notice any sort of tension between them at the time
No.
of that particular function?
No,
Okay. Anything out of the ordinary did you notice between the 2 of them during the time of that birthday party?
no,
Did you get to spend much time with them when they were up in Washington?
not really.
Okay. Did you get to spend much time with the kids?
A little bit.
Okay.
It's hard for a lot of people.
Now, you did hear back from Andrea sometime after you found out that Rusty was deceased. Is that correct, sir?
Yes,
She did call you up and ask for your permission to bury Rusty in Georgia, correct?
yes,
And you granted that permission, correct?
absolutely. Yes, sir.
And you again were present at the actual funeral, correct?
Yes,
Is there a tradition in the Jewish religion of some sort of remembrance ceremony 30 days or so after a person is buried?
can, it's optional.
I'm sorry?
It's not usual, but you can do it.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did Andrea do that in this case?
Yes,
Were you invited to attend that particular function?
yes,
Did you in fact do so?
no.
Now, what communication did you have with Andrea during the month of December of 2010, sir?
There were a couple of calls. That's about all.
Okay. Did you Skype with her?
No,
Not at all?
no,
Not a single Skype between
no,
you and Andrea? How about with the kids?
no,
So there are virtually no Skypes at all in the month of December of 2010.
no. I lost my son on November 18th.
I understand, sir.
Okay.
I'm just asking, are you certain of that fact?
Yes,
Were you interviewed by Detective Thompson of the Dunwoody Police Department on November the 23rd?
I'm not sure what date it was, but I did have an interview with him.
You did voluntarily go into the police department by yourself, right?
Yes,
I guess you went with your wife and your son, Steve, right?
yes, all 3 of us.
But all 3 of you were interviewed separately
Yes.
and distinctly from one another.
Yes,
Can you recall how long that particular interview took, sir?
half hour, 45 minutes, something like that.
During the course of the interview, did you mention to the police the substance of your phone call with Andrea?
No,
You were subsequently, you talked to the police on the 4th of January, did you not? Of 2011 when Newman was arrested?
I talked to Deputy Chief Sides, yes.
Okay. During that particular phone conversation, did you mention that particular conversation, the substance of the phone conversation you had had with Andrea?
No,
You talked to Investigator Potter of the DeKalb District Attorney's Office on or about January the 13th of 2011, did you not?
Probably. Probably. I don't
Okay.
recall it.
You don't need to, I'm not asking about, the exact date is not important. Did you talk to Investigator Potter
Yep.
sometime in early January?
Yes.
Did you mention to Investigator Potter anything about the substance of the conversation that you had had with Andrea?
No.
At some point, you do, let me ask you this. Did Andrea know how much life insurance she had?
No.
How is it that you know that she did not know how much life insurance she had?
The night when the Dunwoody police came over on the 19th, they did a search of Rusty's and Andrea's office upstairs, and going through the files, I found the bills for the life insurance policy. So I knew, and she didn't know.
She had no idea the extent of any sort of life insurance.
That's what
on
she
her
said.
husband. Is that correct?
That's what her father said.
Okay. And that you found the policies yourself, is that correct?
I found the bills for the policies, yes.
Okay. Did the documentation you had shed light on how much insurance there was?
Yes.
Okay. And did you then convey that to Andrea?
No, to her father.
Okay. When the police came on the 19th, if I'm understanding correctly, they were allowed to search
They had
a
a search,
portion of the house, is that correct?
they had a search warrant.
Okay. Do you recall how long that search would have lasted, sir?
Hour and a half, maybe.
And were you present during the time that they were conducting this search in the house?
In the office, yes.
Yes. To your knowledge or recollection, did Andrea consent to that particular search?
Yes.
And that was her home, right?
Yes.
Her and Rusty's home, right?
Yes.
And when you say an office, was that an office for just Rusty, or was it an office for Andrea and Rusty?
It was for both of them.
Okay. Now, at some point in May of 2011, you are requested by the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office to come down to Decatur and be interviewed, right?
Yes.
And you were asked as well as your wife, right?
Yes.
And you communicated that fact to Andrea and said, we can get together and see the kids, right?
Yes.
Did you come?
Yes.
Were you interviewed by representatives of the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office
Yes.
in May of 2011?
Yes.
Was it not in this building, but in the building next door that is connected?
Yes.
And who all did you talk to?
I talked to Don Gary, and I talked to the district attorney.
Okay, and when you said the district attorney, the elected district attorney is Mr. James, correct?
Correct.
And you talked to Mr. Geary.
Yes.
Did you talk to Mr. Potter, the investigator, as well?
I don't recall if I talked to Mr. Potter that day.
And they specifically asked you to come down for an interview, correct?
Yes.
It wasn't a situation where you wanted to come down and find out what the situation was vis-a-vis the case. They asked
There was
you-
some of that.
Okay. Well, Mr. Newman had been arrested at that point, right?
Yes.
Mr. Newman had been arrested for 3.5 months, I guess, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, primarily, they were asking you to come down so they could talk to you, right?
Yes, and we wanted to talk to them.
Did the subject of Andrea's conversation with you on the phone from the day of November the 18th of 2010 come up during the
No.
course of those interviews?
I don't recall.
You have no idea?
I don't recall.
Okay. When you say you do not recall, does that mean you do not recall the substance of those interviews? Or does it mean that you simply don't know if that subject came up?
I don't know if that subject came up.
Did you mention the subject during the course of the interview?
I don't recall.
What did they ask you?
We talked about the case. We talked about what was going on in the case. We talked about lots of different things, but I don't recall whether the phone call came up in the discussion.
Okay. But at some point, the phone call did come up, right?
The phone call did come up.
When was it?
I don't recall.
Okay. Was it before or after the trip down here and there?
I don't recall.
Okay. You recall, or let me ask you this, was the trip down here to meet with Mr. Geary and Mr. James, was that before May 25th or after May 25th?
It was before May 25th.
And do you recall when you actually were talking about the substance of this phone call, Who were you talking to?
I believe I was talking to Don Gary.
Okay. And do you recall, can you give us any indication as to the time frame?
No.
None whatsoever.
It was before that email, but other than that, that's all I recall.
Did you tell him before that email what Andrea said?
Yes.
When is that?
Before May 26th, whatever that email is.
And was that, to your recollection, preserved in any sort of form? Was your conversation recorded?
No.
Okay. You weren't physically there at that time, right?
I wasn't physically...
Were you physically there, or were you talking to him on the phone when you had this conversation, sir?
The conversation with whom?
With Don Geary.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the conversation with Andrea. Okay,
No.
the conversation with Don Gary was probably over the phone.
Okay. Probably over the phone. Does that mean you do not know?
I don't remember that.
Okay. But the bottom line is, on May the 25th, you went ahead and prepared an email, right?
Yes.
You sent a copy to your son, Steve, right?
I sent a copy to my son, Steve, on everything that relates to this.
Now, Ms. Cross asked you about litigation, correct?
Yes.
Is there any litigation going on between Steve and Mrs. Sneiderman?
Yes.
Okay, and is that in Steve's capacity as the executor of the estate?
Yes.
Okay, and is Steve trying to get,
Objection, Your Honor, to the relevance of this.
As long as it's relevant and don't, you're going to the content, I just want to know why it's relevant. Because you're talking about his
Your Honor,
son's lawsuit.
I'd love to respond, but I don't feel comfortable doing so in front of the jury because I
All right,
don't...
ladies and gentlemen, step into the jury room. Mr. Deputy, where's my deputy? Would you assist them, please? Mr. Snyder, will you step out for a minute, please? Yes, sir.
Your Honor, wait till the door's shut.
Jury's out the room. Yes, sir.
Here is why I want to ask this question. We believe the evidence will show from phone records that there was communication between Don Sneiderman, Steve Sneiderman, and Esther Panage, and Esther Panage was in communication with Steve Sneiderman, not with necessarily Don Sneiderman, and then Don and Steve were in communication with one another before the email went out on the day of May the 25th. That suggests to me that there's a possibility that someone told Mr. Sneiderman what to put in the email. I'm exploring that topic on cross-examination. I believe I'm entitled to a thorough and shifting cross-examination, and it goes directly to his credibility as to whether or not the words that he claims were said were actually said.
Response?
Your Honor, Mr. Clegg is more than welcome to ask the witness if anyone told him what to put in the email. That's a direct question that's relevant, and that goes to the witness's bias and the credibility of his testimony. What Mr. Clegg can't do, I believe, is, in a roundabout way, inject the litigation and a potential bias of the relationship between another party outside this witness. If he wants to ask this witness anything about his bias towards the defendant, I think that's fair. If he's looking to inject somebody else's relationship with the defendant, someone who's not a state's witness or certainly not the witness on the stand, I think that's not relevant at this time, and we object.
Response?
Your Honor, the only thing I would note was Ms. Cross herself interjected the issue of whether there was pending litigation into this particular trial.
Well,
And I understand that it dealt with litigation involving him, but at the same time, given what I believe the evidence would show, that there was communication between Steve Sneiderman, the guy actually bringing the suit on behalf of the estate, Esther Panage, the attorney who is representing Mr. Sneiderman in that case, and Don Sneiderman on that particular day before the email is sent, seems to me very relevant.
Well, Mr. Clegg, let me respond this way. I'm going to sustain the objection as far as to the last question you asked pertaining to the lawsuit between Steve Sneiderman and Andrea Sneiderman. But as far as those direct questions you want to ask him about who may have provided him language, you can ask him those questions. So I'm not limiting you in that regard.
Okay, that's...
So I mean, what you actually the point that you actually got to at the end of your presentation, I have no problem with that. I'll rule that objection. You can ask those questions directly of him.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out exactly what I can ask and ask.
Well,
And I understand
I
the
can
court's
tell you.
position is ask what you want, Mr. Clegg. I'll sustain the objection and the state can object, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
However, as far as the last question pertaining to the litigation involving Steve Sneiderman and Andrea Sneiderman, that's what I'm sustaining. If you want to ask him anything, and I understand your quote-unquote the ultimate point that you want, you can go into that area because you indicated that something may show and may not show that someone else may have suggested the language in the email.
Okay.
You are not limited whatsoever about his action, his conduct, what he may or may not have heard.
So I am entitled, if I understand correctly, to ask questions about whether he had contact with Steve Sneiderman on that day, whether he, to his knowledge, Steve Sneiderman had contact with Esther Panich on that particular day, and whether anything was told to him as to what the content of the email ought to be. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, sir. Just I don't want to get in trouble, Judge. I don't want to ask an inappropriate question in front of the jury. So.
No, you can, as I said, you are not limited at all about questions about what he may or may not have, information you received. The objection came on the reference to, quote unquote, the lawsuit director of Steve Snyder. That's what I was sustaining. So
okay, sure,
you're not limited. You're entitled to a thorough and sifting examination, and you can ask as many questions as you deem appropriate.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We are here for the duration.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Bring in the jury. That's it. Hey, Ms. Cross, would you have your investigator bring in Mr. Snyder?
I will, Your Honor, thank you.
Or whoever is assisting you? You can come on back up, Mr. Snyder. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. You can be seated in your seat. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. You may be seated in your seat. You may be seated, Mr. Snyder. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. You may be seated in your seat, or you can find your favorite seat. Sit where you want. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen. Make yourself comfortable. All right. Ms. Clegg, we're back on the record. You may continue, sir, with those instructions.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Mr. Sneiderman, directing your attention to May the 25th, the day that you sent the email to Don Geary. What time was it that you sent that email?
It's time-stamped, I don't know.
Okay. Let me just see if I can refresh your memory here.
Yes, sir. You may approach. What number is that, Kelly?
Mr. Clegg, it's number 53, I think.
Oh, you have it right there. Thank you, Ms.
Yeah,
Thomas.
it's not yet been completed.
Okay. May I approach?
You may. Yes, sir.
Okay. Sir, let me show you what has been marked for purposes of identification as State's Exhibit number 53, and ask if you recognize what that document is, sir.
Yes, this is the email to Don Gary.
Okay. And does that reflect the time that that email would have been sent, sir?
2:45 in the afternoon.
Okay. Prior to sending that email, had you had any communication or contact with your son Steve on that particular day?
I don't recall if I talked to him that day or not. I talked to him almost every day.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you do not recall whether you did or not?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you recall having any communication with Steve on that day about the specific contents of what you were going to put into the email?
No.
Okay. Did you talk to Steve at some point prior to that day about the specific content of the information you were going to put into the email?
No, he never asked me what I was going to put in the email. We talked about the fact that I needed to send Don Gary an email.
Okay. So you and your son, and what is the time frame? Is this after you get back from Atlanta?
Yes.
Meeting with Mr. Geary?
Yes.
And you tell your son, you're giving him an update on the investigation, correct? status of the case?
He had been with us in Atlanta.
Okay, and at some point, you tell him, I'm going to be communicating with Don Geary, and I'm going to be sending him an email, correct?
Correct.
But you do not communicate the nature of the information that you're going to put into the email?
No.
Okay. Any particular reason why not?
He didn't need to know.
He didn't need to know?
No.
Had you told him the contents of the email prior to your sending it?
No.
Did you tell him about the conversation you had with Andrea on the morning of November the 18th of 2010 before you sent that email to Don Geary?
Probably.
Possibly yes, possibly no?
Yeah.
So you communicated with Don Geary before you communicated with your own son, right?
Yep.
But since he didn't need to know, you nonetheless sent him a copy of that email.
Yes.
Correct, sir? I'm presuming you would have had some conversations with him after that information was conveyed to Mr. Geary, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the second portion of what Andrea is supposed to have said, I'm so sorry.
Yes, sir.
You testified today that when she calls you on January the 4th of 2011, she used the exact same terminology, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what else did she say on January the 4th?
That's all she said. So I'm so sorry.
Okay. And was she excited at that time? Her tone of voice excited?
No,
Okay. Was she distraught?
I don't know. She was crying, and she was saying, I'm so sorry, but that's all.
Okay. You had told Investigator Potter back in January of 2011 about the so sorry comment at the time of the January 4th conversation, had you not?
Yes.
You had already told that to the...
No, wait. On the excuse me, if you're going to try to do this, then I'll have to do some other things. There was no discussion on January 4th with Potter because that was the arresting date in which I talked to Deputy Chief Sides.
Okay. I didn't say there was a conversation on January the 4th.
Yes, you did.
Potter. Did you talk to Potter sometime early in January of 2011?
Yes.
Did you tell Potter in the course of that conversation, referring back to what Andrea said on January 4th, that she said, I'm so sorry?
I don't remember that.
Okay. I am going to show you a document, sir, and take a minute to find it here.
You may. Take as much time as you need.
Thank you, sir. Oh, here it is.
What number is this? Is
This would
number
be
12?
Defense Exhibit number 12, Your Honor.
All right.
May I approach you?
You may.
Okay. I am going to show you, sir, what has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit number 12. And again, I'm going to ask you to read to yourself. This first is a bullet point right here on the first page, and then there is a little sentence here, I suppose a paragraph, but a sentence. You can just read that sentence, okay? Tell me when you're finished reading it.
Okay?
Okay. Does that refresh your memory as to whether or not you told, excuse me, Mark Potter, Investigator Potter, about Andrea's saying, I'm so sorry on the evening of January the 4th?
On the evening of January 4th, yes.
Okay. And again, just because it's in a report doesn't make it so. Does that refresh your memory?
That's what I told you before.
Okay. Now, when you told him that that's what Andrea said on January the 4th, did you also tell him, you know, darndest thing, that's the same thing that Andrea said on November the 18th?
No.
Any particular reason why not?
No.
Did you remembered the conversation on November the 18th, did you not?
Yes.
You remembered that the exact terminology used on November the 18th was the same that was used on January the 4th, correct?
Yes.
It is, after all, etched in your mind forever, correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
How much contact did you have? Well, let me ask you this. Was there a gravestone that was prepared for Rusty some point in 2011, sir?
A gravestone, yes.
Okay. And did Andrea invite you to come down to attend the unveiling of that particular gravestone, sir?
Yes, sir.
Did you do so?
No.
Was there a attempt to set up a scholarship fund at the University of Indiana for Rusty?
Yes.
Okay. Did Andrea invite you to participate over the phone through a discussion concerning that, sir?
Yes.
She did not?
Yes, she did.
She did. Did you, in fact, participate in that discussion?
No, I did not.
Okay. And did you make any contribution to that particular scholarship?
That's private.
I'm sorry?
That's my personal contributions, and what I do with my money is not relevant to this case.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Hold on a second. Now you got to answer the question. I'm sorry. Either you can say yes, no, you can explain, but you have to answer the question.
Okay. No, I did not.
Okay. Did you communicate to Andrea, did you communicate with Andrea by Skype in January, if you recall, sir?
No, I did not.
Okay. Need a fresh batch of stickers.
You may. Kelly Carpenter will provide you as many stickers as you need.
Okay, and I guess I'm up to
13.
number 13, Your Honor.
You are.
May I approach you with...
Yes, sir. You may approach.
Okay. Sir, I am going to show you a document that has been marked for purposes of identification as, wait a second, I got the wrong one. Never mind.
So we're not doing...
I'm going back here.
We're not doing 13?
I've got a document that I'm not sure has anything to do with...
So this is going to be 13 now?
This will be 13, yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, now
So that'll be-
I will show the new 13 to Ms. Cross.
And that'll be, I'm sorry, you're talking with Ixnay? It'll be Ixnay.
I'm sorry, what, sir?
You said Ixnay. I don't know what that...
Ixnay, that means
I'll tell the
good riddance to the previous document.
All
We
right.
will be sticking it into the bottom of the pile, sir.
All right, that'll be fine.
Okay. Okay. May I approach you?
Yes, sir. With that 13, yes, sir.
Yes, this is 13. Okay, let me show you a document that has been marked for purposes of identification. It's Defendant's Exhibit number 13. Would you read the bottom portion of that particular document, sir?
It's just a quick note about how much we enjoyed seeing the kids and talking to you this morning on Skype.
I'm sorry?
We talked to the kids on Skype.
Okay. And you address the, so that does refresh your memory, right?
Yep.
Okay, and you addressed the email to Andrea, did you not?
Yes.
And what did you tell Andrea in that email?
Just a quick note on how much we enjoyed seeing you and talking to the kids on Skype.
Okay.
So I did talk to her on Skype.
Okay. Just a quick note about how much we enjoyed seeing and talking to you this morning on Skype.
Your Honor,
I'm sorry, 1 second. What's the objection,
my
if there is
objection is
one?
that document hasn't been tendered or entered. I don't have an objection to it being tendered and entered into evidence, but it just has not been yet. So
Okay,
before
I
it's
will-
spread to the jury.
All right, if you
Ms.
could,
Crowe, I will tender state Defense Exhibit number 13 at this time.
any objection to number 13 being
No,
entered?
Your Honor.
All right, 13 will be entered at this point in time, and actually, this is an excellent stopping point. Ladies and gentlemen, we're sending you home for the evening. Let me give you these instructions. You've been And first of all, let me thank you. You've been very attentive all day. You're going to leave your notes there in the jury room and set them face down. No one's going to look at your notes besides you, and if you need additional notepads, we'll provide those to you tomorrow. Do not discuss the case or allow anyone to discuss the case with you. Once I release you for this evening, do not remain upon the floor because I don't want you to interact with anyone you should not interact with. Do not read or look at any media coverage pertaining to this case. Do not go upon the internet and do any research about this case. Do not blog about this case while it is ongoing. All the evidence will come to you in the form of sworn testimony that is presented during the course of the trial and or any physical evidence that is introduced during the course of the trial. Do not go to any location that may not have been made reference to. You're more than welcome to bring something to snack in or eat with you during for the morning session. Do not overindulge in any type of alcohol tonight, and do not consume any alcoholic beverages during the lunch breaks. The deputy at this point in time will turn back over to your smartphones, iPhones, and iPads. At this point in time, you can check your messages, but however, do not communicate with anyone about this case, either in text or any other type of communication way. The lawyers and the parties cannot talk and interact with you. I don't ever want you to think they're being rude or discourteous. Now, I know, unrelated to this case, I'm going to have something earlier in the morning, but as I indicated, if I'm in session with something else, don't worry about that. You just come on into the courtroom, have a seat there in the jury room, and we will proceed tomorrow morning. We're going to start tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Now, you can be early, but you cannot be late, so be here in a timely fashion. I believe there was a forecast that it may be raining later this week, which means, I just mention that because you just need to leave from wherever you come from in enough time so that you can park in the garage, come to the metal detector, and be physically on the floor so that we can actually start and begin in a timely fashion. All right, that's the only reason I mentioned the weather report. I just checked that just to give you those additional information so to make sure that you understand you can be early, but you can't be late. We're in recess till 9 o'clock. All right.